Good morning, this is Ken at Tortoise Capital. It is April 14th, 2019. Do you know where your taxes are? So I want to go through a series of what we thought were value-added narratives and flashcards and presentations at the boot camp out here in Leavenworth. We took a vote and the guys decided that the quality of the video was improved by removing my face. I don't disagree with them. So we're going to zoom in on the storyboard. So what I want to talk about on this one is the practical challenge facing us as traders. And there are three perspectives that I want to blend here. And so this is an integration of ideas from the trader's mind and the trader's practice, what traders have to do every day, but also field grade officers in the Army. And these are organizational leaders that are in charge of 1,000 or 2,000 people, and they have to have systems that work, but also leadership of people, and it integrates equipment and technology and people in a robust, reliable way that allows them to solve problems of life and death issues. So it's got to be robust, it's got to be able to be successful in all kinds of environments. So they've developed habits of mind that look very similar to, if not identical, with those of traders. I also work a lot with PhDs that are looking to make changes in the world, and so they have to integrate insights from a vast body of professional literature, but figure out how to right size and apply that to organizations trying to solve real world problems. So the idea of trying to acquire, validate, update, and then apply technical information and theoretical information in a practical way is a challenge for them. And so some of those habits of mind about dealing with a professional body of knowledge or a doctrine resonates with the challenges that the practical trader has. And so this is a diagram that I use to explain the essential nature of the practical challenge facing us as traders. So what I want you to imagine is that at the end of the day yesterday, you conducted your after-action review of all the things that you were doing, you consulted your strategic plan, and you decided that I've updated my to-do list for tomorrow that I want to accomplish 5 things. And then you feel good, you lock up, you go home, you recharge with your family and whatever you do. And then you come to work the next day, and then you discover that your plan does not survive contact with the enemy. That's what happens in the Army and to traders and to consultants and business owners all the time. That the real world starts happening while you went in with a certain plan, the world gets a vote. And so then we respond to that because some of those are important, or might be important, or they might reflect opportunities as well as problems. But when these things are coming at us, we may only see the tip of the iceberg. You know, it's coming towards us this way. And so there may be a hidden problem in there, but we have to start acting in time. So I want you to imagine that a field grade officer or a trader or a CEO or an office manager comes to work every day with that plan of things to do, and they arrive, and in the middle there's this battle pit. That's the open area, and around that battle pit you have people on your team or systems, and the left-hand side reflects the world of approved traditional doctrine that's been time-tested principles that are robust and will guide you in times of trouble, and that, or it might be a trader's professional body of knowledge, the standards of practice and the habits that will keep you successful as a member of a profession, or as the academic literature of a PhD that we have to respect. It could be like medical information and all that. So on the left-hand side, as you see this problem starting to develop and starting to come at you, about which you can only see the front, you are guided by this doctrine and these principles and how to handle standard problems in the correct way for good reasons, based on experience and education and reflection and your habits of mind, which are informed by your values, goals, and identity, and those of the organization that you've chosen to become part of. So there's authoritative guidance in the form of best practices that suggests that's the way that you ought to handle those problems or opportunities. But at the same time, on the other side of the room, there are these creative impulses that we know that the world is changing in time. Because of the actions that we take and the actions that others take, the world adapts in response, so it's never the same world twice. So at some point, the world is leaving your body of knowledge behind. So you know you have to stay connected to that. And the way we do that is with our primate brain that is creative. And then we may have the ability to do some critical thinking. So we can generate really good ideas by doing divergent thinking. But at some point, because we have to act in time in the world to make a difference, we have to go through a convergent thinking process in order to come to a moment whereby we can act on these problems and opportunities that occur. And the challenge is that a lot of problems look like typical problems until you dig deeper and discover there's more to it, and there's something different, and your standard practices don't work. And you need your creativity to come up with new possible solutions, and you need critical thinking to be able to evaluate them to see if that's something that will work now. And then you have to make a decision as the actor. Which way am I going to go on this problem that I'm only beginning to understand? In the usual doctrinal, traditional way? Or is this the time that I listen to my creative impulses? And so you have to make a critical thinking choice on the subject of incomplete, or in the face of incomplete information, and then you have to act on that. And then you're going to get some results from that. And then you're going to have to ask other people to act on it and learn from it. And you don't just get one problem, you get a lot of problems coming at you. And that's why our to-do list often gets overwhelmed, and it's 2 o'clock in the afternoon and I haven't accomplished anything on my list because of all the things that I've had to contend with, which were important. And if I neglected them, the ship would sink. So I've got to take care of business. And then at some point I may have created some time and space where I can start working on my list if I remember it's still there. So the world starts coming at you in a series of little transactions, and you solve it, or you seize the opportunity, you resolve it, you study it and defer it to act later, and you start making a bunch of transactional decisions. And if you're not careful, and you're not mindful, and you're not philosophical, your life becomes a series of individual decisions that came at you from a random number generator. The world decides what problem it's going to face, not you. So the reason we have strategies is to ensure that we have a blueprint and a vision to the future of what we want to achieve. And that's connected to our values, goals, and identity and outcomes, and the difference we want to make in the world. And then we have tactics down here, in which we have practices, drills, SOPs, procedures, rules, systems that allow us to handle these transactions in a regular way. And then we use this operational level where we connect strategy to tactics. And what that means is that while we are choosing which things to act on and we resolve it, we want to resolve it in a way so that instead of a series of disconnected transactions, we're actually getting better in each one of those so that our performance next time starts to improve, and we can start iterating towards our strategic goals in the way that we conduct our tactical jobs and the way that we can learn from some of these ideas to get better, and then we can roll that back into our practice. Well, that's what that actor in the middle has to do. You've got to solve problems, seize opportunities, make the critical distinction between, do I listen to my creative impulse, do I follow the doctrine? And then when I look at the doctrine, like a PhD does, I have to say, which of that doctrine is now outlived its usefulness and I drop that off? What should be preserved? And then what should I add based on these creative impulses that test it out pretty well? How many times does that have to work before it's not just a good idea in the moment, but it actually is something that's a candidate to move over into the doctrine and the professional body of knowledge so that I can improve going forward? Well, you have to continually manage this body of knowledge, because that is a provisional understanding of how this changing world actually works. And while you're doing that, you also have to take actions in time to start working on these partially understood problems. So you have to make a diagnosis of what kind of a problem it is, pick the right strategy, implement necessary action, and then learn from the ongoing engagement. Is this really the kind of a problem I thought I have, or is it something else? So you are humbly but and provisionally acting, but in a way so that you can improve and iterate towards success. And then learn the things that can and should be learned and update your doctrine in that way, and still recognize that the importance of creative thinking is to do this divergent thinking, to generate a lot of ideas. Well, that means that many, if not most, aren't going to pay off. So you can't punish yourself for coming up with ideas that don't work. That's the only way that you can actually find things that might work. And then we have to develop a secondary skill of critical thinking to take the creative list and turn it into actionable items. And then once we have those, we've got to prepare to execute those things in an effective and an efficient way. And so we develop checklists and rule sets and standard procedures so that we have a body of professional actions that we can take to solve things that look to be identifiable. So this becomes our standard practice. So in the mind of the trader, of the army officer, of the PhD, we almost act like the Hindu trilogy, where we have Brahma, the creator, and we have Shiva, the destroyer, who's getting rid of the things that are no longer necessary, and we have Vishnu, the preserver, who is ensuring that that which should be preserved is. So we have all three of those activities going on, and we're operating at three different levels, the strategic all the way down to the tactical, and we're not just looking at individual moments in time, but we're also taking a longer view and trying to anticipate what the world may be like so that we can steer in time towards a future that is emerging, that is becoming, that is being shaped by the actions we take today. So those are the challenges that you have, and to be able to simultaneously operate in all those dimensions and all those time frames and at different levels with different degrees of certainty is the challenge that we have to put our primate brain into action. Because if you don't, what you're going to be operating on is a world that is driven by impulses to action, which are driven by your response to these environmental pressures which you don't control. So if you don't have a wedge in between the impulse to act and the actual action, then who you are and what you do is driven by how your organism responds to those environmental pressures. So the art of self-mastery, the Eastern warrior approach, the mindfulness effort here is to acknowledge that these emotions and events and these trigger events are happening and that they have a response that you want to act on, but we get to choose. You know, my dog wants a treat all the time. But because he wants a treat doesn't mean I give him a treat. My filter, the wedge between his impulse and my action, is my critical thinking and my creative thinking and my reflective thing. So I give him treats when he's earned it, or I think he needs it, or I just want to treat him. And so I get to decide on how to act. When I feel hungry, I know that's going to last 10 minutes, and that's my inner dog wanting a treat right now. I know that's going to last 10 minutes, and I know that I have a plan for eating and fasting that's healthy. And so I time that, and I acknowledge it. I can't control it. I can't eliminate the hunger. That's a biological driven impulse. It already occurs by the time I feel it, but I get to choose on how to act. And so we can exercise that muscle and get better at it and choose to act on things that are consistent with our strategy and our end state, which is shaped by who we are and a deep understanding of what we can do. So I say all that simply to say our challenge as a trader then is to ensure that we are choosing actions to act in an efficient, effective, reliable, consistent way, production, but also going through these critical and creative processes so that we can ensure that we are putting the right action on the right problem, and that we are managing those results so that we can improve our doctrine and our professional body of knowledge, so that we can apply it in a proper way and develop those habits and processes that support us in our toolkit and that are right for us as tested by experience and as judged by reflective learning, and find ways to preserve our creative instinct to discover new ways to solve old problems or ways to address new problems, and being mindful that each problem is unique. Some of them are similar to what we've done, and some of them may be the first time for a new set of problems that are coming in the future. And so we've got to be adaptive and live our life going forward. We got to study those results and learn from them as we can. And then we've got to anticipate things in the future based on projecting what we know and hypothesizing and testing. So all of those challenges are the practical challenges of being a trader. Figuring out how to do each of those little individual pieces is good, but when it comes time to work, to actually trade, you are the guy in the middle here who has to balance this inner life of experiences, education, practices, to deal with the external world of trigger events, to respond to the needs to be creative but also to be reliable, and then to produce results that allow you to achieve what your strategic goals are. And do that in a way each day so that through continuous improvement, the way I solve each problem makes me better adapted to solve the next problem, whatever it may be. And the only way I can do that is by going through a planning, preparing, executing, and assessment cycle so that I plan by generating workable ideas. I prepare so that I have a detailed level of due diligence so that I can engage with other professionals because they're prepared. And then I execute in a way that is confident, strong, efficient, effective. And then I study the results so that I can improve each of those processes. And if I can iterate in that way, I'm not just solving individual problems, but I'm also learning how to solve problems better in the future and learn by going forward. That's our challenge, to operate in multiple time streams in different categories. And so the components that I teach, or that anybody can teach, we tend to isolate just on one rule set and hold everything else constant and just focus on those couple things. But in reality, we've got to find ways to then reintegrate all of these pieces. So you have to focus in order to study, but then when you apply, you are holistic. So it really does matter how we go through this acquisition of skills, how we start with unconscious incompetence, where I'm bad and I don't even know it. And then I become conscious of my incompetence, and I can focus on some things, or incompetence, I should say. Unconscious incompetence, conscious incompetence. I'm at least aware of that. And then I can develop conscious competence where I am thinking about it and then doing it in a reliable way. I then get habits of mind that make me unconsciously competent, where it becomes a ritual or a habit and I'm not even aware of what that is. Like driving the car. Did I actually stop at the red light this morning? I don't know, but I survived, so I must have been operating at the sufficient level of management to allow me to successfully drive the car. We can get to the point where our trading practice is like that, so we reduce the cognitive effort that it takes to execute our standard practices. But we can't be completely unconscious, because if the world moves enough that invalidates our rules, then we are going to drive off a cliff and not even be aware of it. So we've got to find a way to have just enough mindfulness and alertness to ensure that the robot or the process can work, and at the same time we're being mindful enough to detect early those signals that tell us something's changing and we can look for new opportunities. So I like to design systems before I need them. And the way I do that is by looking at what I can learn from my already good enough practices and how can I make some tweaks to improve in case that change in the world happens later. And then when it does happen, I've got something prepared. So I develop those systems before I need them because that's easier than trying to do it under pressure, under a spotlight and time constraints. So this is what the practical challenge of the trading enterprise is, what the inside of the mind of the trader is like, the social, environmental, and historical pressures that shape the challenges, and then the uncertain future that's changing so much that we even wonder, are any of those things we learned in the past still good, or do I have to really investigate the emerging future and discard more of my doctrine in order to make room for the new things that I'm going to learn? This is the eternal challenge of the creator, the destroyer, and the preserver in that trinity of our mindset on the inside. And if you're doing that for yourself, it's hard enough. If you've got other people on your team, you now add that extra layer of complexity. So choose our team wisely and figure out what each of us can do, and then figure out how to be the chief of staff to integrate all of these pieces and develop a plan that is actionable and robust and can survive and then thrive in a complex world. That's the challenge that we face. And the things that I've learned as a trader are similar to the things that I've learned as a Army officer in combat and leading other soldiers and being shot at, and things that I've learned about knowledge acquisition, validation, and development in my doctoral program and in the teaching of others. There is a synergy between all those things that allows some of these commonalities to emerge. So when you hear me talking about my response to the world and the way I try to survive, it does come from my experiences and the reflective learning that I've done in those three areas, and it has that flavor. Your job is to figure that out for yourself. What is your collection of strengths to exploit, the weaknesses to protect against, the opportunities that might be seized, the threats that might be protected against, and then do that in a collaborative way with trusted others so that we can learn and grow with each other. So that's our practical challenge. The tortoise ecological system of learning is really designed to address all of those pieces. And so even though at times I drill down deeply into those, it's important to see sometimes that heuristic ecosystem as a biological system going forward in some of the challenges that we face, and figuring out what to do next. What pieces can I start improving? I have enough time to improve some of these some of the time, but still have to get back to a holistic view, sometimes drilling in, sometimes stepping out. Okay? So that's what we mean by the practical challenge facing the trader, and may give a top-down view of this tortoise learning ecosystem. So thanks for your attention.